Let's do more criteria. I'm going to leave use of sources for now. I want to do something that's a little bit more in the writing. One of my big fuzzy goals for the course is to see critical thinking in their writing. But students don't know what I mean by that. What does critical thinking look like in my class? For me, it's the ability to organize information and make interesting new connections. I see good thinking when I see those explicit connections between ideas. So that is synthesis of ideas, which I see as somewhat different from organizational connections, which could mean transitions and is the writing coherent, whereas synthesis of ideas is bigger than the writing. Right now, I have some criteria written down: organization, clarity of writing, and synthesis of ideas. So we can continue either coming up with other things that fall under critical thinking, but I'm going to dig into synthesis of ideas. I'm going to go a little faster on this one since you've already seen the process. I'm leaving out some of the ways these ideas unfolded to show you a more concise development, but this still took a lot of drafting and rewording similar to the last criteria. For excels, I would describe excelling as synthesis of ideas. They should be able to summarize each of the main arguments or each of the main texts or perspectives. Something that really blows me away would have a nice objective summary to let me know that they understood the pieces on their own. Jumping over to meets expectations, they might have a clear summary, but it contains biased language in the summary. When you get comfortable with outlining your criteria, you may not need to strictly move from exceeds to does not meet. You can put down your ideas as they pop up. The key is explicitly defining what each column looks like to you in a way that students can understand. To show me synthesis that exceeds my expectations, I would see the sources in conversation with each other. What does that mean? The paper anticipates counter-arguments and responses. Or makes explicit connections between the sources to explain differences and similarities. Something I'm always impressed with is when students account for exceptions or the unknown. They say, well, here's what they think now, but there's still this other stuff that they don't know yet that we would need to be sure about it. So they would exceed my expectations if it accounts for what is still unknown or unclear. I would also love to see students draw a novel conclusion that accounts for both perspectives, but I should clarify that a little bit more. I'm not asking them to write a dissertation or invent something new, but great critical thinking, great synthesis pulls it together in a way not thought about before. They're not simply siding with one of the authors, but seeing a new connection between the ideas. They're seeing a connection between the ideas that has not yet been stated or is not obvious from the course materials. So in the meets category then, finds a connection between sources, but connection is superficial or has been stated in other materials. The first idea that we talked about was explains each idea in a fundamental or in a foundational way, an objective summary of each point of view or text. For does not meet, that would be objective summaries of one or more texts are missing. Paper jumps to conclusions without explaining individual perspectives. Or summaries are clearly biased toward a student's conclusion. When you're done developing your criteria, each of these columns can be assigned point values. It may not make sense for you to give each row the same point value. For example, in the assignment here, choosing sources is going to be more important than the overall argumentative structure of the paper. The same goes for grammar and mechanics. I need to be able to follow what you're saying, but I don't want to give a really low grade to someone who did great thinking but isn't a great writer. So I'll pull that out into a separate table. So you've filled out all the rows. You've given everything point values. How do you know this rubric is ready to use or that you're done? The important thing to remember is that rubrics aren't ever done. It's an iterative process. You have to just begin using it. If you have old student work, try it on a few samples. Does it separate tiers of work? Or do you see it lumping work together that your gut tells you aren't equally good? If the rubric doesn't have enough tiers, you may need 5 columns instead of 3. Or if you find yourself pushing back about giving an assignment a particular score, you may need to edit the criteria or even reevaluate which criteria you want to weight more heavily. Something we hear a lot is that a rubric is too prescriptive. It tells students how to write the assignment or doesn't really separate the amazing work from the decent work. There are 2 issues brought up by these statements. First, the rubric shouldn't tell the students the answers. It sets the target for what should be included and gives them a path for improvement. And if it doesn't give you a space to recognize over-the-top amazing work, reevaluate that top column and see if you can adjust the definition for exceeds expectations. Rubrics can also be used not just as feedback, but also as a way to involve students in their own learning. Students can use your rubric in peer review to guide the students in reading each other's work critically, or students can complete a self-evaluation of their work to turn in, indicating where they think they need improvement. If one of your goals is to increase student metacognition and awareness of their own learning, this can be a productive way to engage them in that process without taking other class time.